The Schilling Show continues on this Manic Monday edition of the program. Program note coming up tomorrow on the Schilling Show. He's been here before, and we kind of kicked off his campaign for information about the National Association of Realtors attacking Christian realtor Wilson Faber, and he has updates on his situation. We've been talking to him over the course of time. That will be on tomorrow's edition of the Schilling Show. Right now, I'm pleased to welcome back to the Schilling Show Joel Gardner. He's the president of the Jefferson Council, and there's so much in the news at UVA. Joel, welcome back. Thanks for joining us today.
Well, hey, Rob, how are you? It's great to be back on your show. Appreciate it.
I want you to tell people right off the bat, so I don't forget, if there are any upcoming events that the public is invited to that are being hosted by or promoted by the Jefferson Council. Anything we ought to know about?
Yes, there are a few. Yomi, there's going to be a speech in March by Yomi Park that's being co-sponsored by the YAF and the Jefferson Council. She is a Korean that is going to talk about the dictatorship in Korea and all the implications of their rule there. But that's coming up next month. And then we're having our annual dinner on April 8th, which we'd love to have as many people as possible attend. And we're looking into some other potential speakers in the spring, which hopefully we'll be able to shortly announce.
Terrific. I know there's a lot of good stuff going on, and we'll give the website and all the contact information before we say goodbye today. So I wanted to get into this Board of Visitors meeting on UVA Health and their policies. The President Trump, issued an executive order on surgical and chemical mutilation. What followed at the UVA Health system?
Well, I think what followed after the executive order was that the health system initially suspended all what they call gender-affirming care. And then a federal judge issued a TRO, which temporary restraining order, which held up temporarily the president's enforcement of that executive order. And as soon as that happened, the hospital reversed course and said that they will continue their gender-affirming procedures. So that was the status until Friday morning when the board met.
Let's talk about the board meeting and what was the testimony that was provided. How much of it was public and how much was private? What can you tell us?
Nothing was public.
Oh, okay.
Which is, the entire board meeting was held in secret session, and the only public parts of that meeting were kind of gathering together and then went into behind closed doors, and then when they came out, they just ended it. There was no real public statements. They have issued, I believe, the resolutions on gender care and proper board governance that were adopted by the board. But none of the discussions regarding either board governance or the gender care were public. None of the discussions were public.
So what do we know about the outcome? Did they say, hey, here's what we're doing going forward, or do we have to assume that from someone else's statement? What happened?
No, they issued in the resolutions they passed. I'd like to say from the outset, the substantive issue that was apparently discussed was the reaction of the university to the president's executive order and what the UVA healthcare system could do. That was the sub. But to me, it was, in fact, the board governance issues that were dramatic and were historic. But I'll first kind of respond. The board really took a measured approach to the gender-affirming care issue. They try to thread the needle between a medical system providing care to their patients and an executive order issued by the president. And what they came up with is they reaffirmed their dedication to current patient care and basically saying that they support the compassion and ethical care of their patients that are already there. But then they said basically they will not be taking on any new students, any new patients in regard to this. So, they were trying to thread the needle.
Yes.
On one hand, they said we're going to take care of the patients that already exist. And on the other hand, say we're going to redirect you to private care if you want to start anew. I'm not sure how that is going to interact with the executive order, if in fact the executive order withstands judicial scrutiny, because the executive order basically prohibits the hospitals from directing any care, calling it gender-affirming care, to those who are under 19 years of age. So that's yet to be determined, but the actions they took were kind of Solomon-esque in splitting the baby.
I thought exactly the same thing, and I don't think anyone's really going to be happy with this, although some people might be relieved that they're at least not going forward with it. So are they awaiting final judicial disposition of this before they make a final policy, or is this the final policy?
They said that if you read through the resolutions, they're basically going to be studying the issue. They're going to have some experts studying the issue. But I think a lot of it is going to be determined as to whether the executive order withstands judicial scrutiny. If it does, then if the university does continue to extend care to their patients that already exist, then the query will be whether that would subject the university to potential loss of revenues. So I tend to think this is not the last we're going to hear of this. I think they tried to take a position on the facts that existed on Friday. And again, I think it was a measured approach. But like you say, I don't think there's going to be everybody happy on either side with this. I mean, it reads as it's well thought out, what they've done, but
yes,
only the future will tell how they, what is actually going to be done at the university. And I think that's after the TRO expires and whether there's any further legal action and how that's all determined. But again, as I said in the opening, I don't think that was the really significant, important, long-term act that was taken by the board at this meeting.
When we come back on the other side with Joel Gardner from the Jefferson Council, I want to talk about this issue of governance and board governance and why that is the more significant part of this, and perhaps the part that's being under or not reported at all, but you'll hear it here on the Schilling Show. Stay with us. We have one segment ahead with Joel Gardner. If you have comments or questions, 977-1070. All right, the Schilling Show into our final segment of the day, continuing with the president of the Jefferson Council, Joel Gardner, joins us. UVA has lots of news going on. So we were talking about this Board of Visitors meeting, and the one thing that's perhaps been under or unreported is the governance issue that you say is more important even than the one we were discussing previously. So why don't you give us some background and what was decided, Joel?
Sure. Background is that at least for the past decade, the Board of Visitors has in essence been a rubber stamp for two successive UVA administrations. They have not, overlooked what's being done, commented, make any changes, make any material suggestions. It's basically been a rubber stamp for the administrations. But now what the board has done, and of course there's been a change in administrations in Richmond, and now the appointees by Governor Youngkin constitute 13 out of the 17 voting members of the Board of Visitors. And what they've done with the resolutions they've passed is they've established the primacy of the Board of Visitors in the governance of the university, which is appropriate and which by law actually exists. And the importance of this whole thing is all in one whereas clause,
yes,
and in two resolutions passed. And I'm just going to read directly from them because everybody should hear, because this has set our university on a new course in terms of governance by the Board of Visitors, which are appointed by the governor. One of the whereas clauses says, whereas the Board of Visitors is responsible for seeing the effective and transparent governance of the university, and pursuant to Virginia Law Code Section 23.1-1301, among other matters, the Board of Visitors is granted the authority to make regulations and policies for the university, and this Board of Visitors intends to exercise such authority. It's an incredible statement, given the recent history of the university. And then it follows at the end with two resolutions which were approved by the board, I understand, with a 14-1 vote. It's resolved that the Board of Visitors shall directly advise on compliance with any presidential executive orders in consultation with its legal counsel, including any further decisions related to the aforementioned presidential executive orders. And then, even more importantly, is the last resolution, which says, resolved that the Board of Visitors shall be consulted prior to any consideration or announcement of any material policy changes of the university or the creation of any task force or other committee created to formulate or evaluate any potential material policy changes. And the Board of Visitors may determine in its discretion the scope, objectives, and final membership of any such group or the content of any such announcement. That is such an incredible change and shift in the power dynamics at UVA.
Then are we to surmise, Joel Gardner, that these policies were not being followed previously? I mean, that's what I would take from this. Like, this is what we're doing from here on out, and we were not doing this previously.
I think you can deduce it from there. I mean, before that, everything, the whole governance of this university basically emanated from Madison Hall, from the president's office, and the people he has appointed. I mean, all committees have been appointed by the president and task forces have been appointed by the president without going to the board for their approval. And policy, major policy, like just what we've been talking about, both initially making the decision to withhold the treatments, the gender treatments, and then the policy to rescind that was done without the board's participation.
Well, this is fascinating, and it will certainly lead to what I would think is a completely different dynamic at the University of Virginia. Has there been a statement from the president's office regarding this, or was he present when these were presented?
I believe he was present, and as far as I know, there's been no statement from the president's office. I'm unaware of any.
So what do you anticipate, practically speaking, going forward as a result of these resolutions? Are there anything tangible that you can think of that will immediately be evident?
Well, I think what will be tangible, there's another presidential executive order hanging out there on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And that was issued a week ago, the Friday before the board meeting. And in that executive order, it basically gives universities 2 weeks to disband their DEI apparatuses or be subject to potential funds being withheld. So that 2 weeks, at least to my accounting, ends this Friday. And if UVA does nothing about its current DEI infrastructure, which I believe about a year or two ago on a study was found to be of the 60 top universities in the country, is like number 2 in terms of numbers of people involved in the DEI apparatus. There's going to be something to be done on that, because arguably and potentially as of next Friday, if nothing is done, the university could be losing a substantial amount of funding. What is to be done? I don't know. What the board intends to do on that, I don't know as of now. I would imagine there is the possibility of directives coming from Richmond in that regard. The board's got its hands full. I mean, tomorrow the board will be meeting. I believe we'll be receiving a copy of the Williams and Connolly report, which was an outside counsel did a report on the whole alleged health care scandals. So that's a huge, huge issue.
Well, I'm glad you brought this up because we've had a number of people asking over the interim what's going on with that, as if it had just been brushed under the carpet or dismissed. So there's a report coming out about this. To what extent will that report be available to the public, or will it be heavily redacted?
I really don't have the answer to that.
Yeah.
My humble judgment would be that we're not going to be seeing that report anytime soon. And I would believe that the meeting tomorrow will be probably held behind closed doors again. When such report will be made public, I really don't know. But that's, as I think anybody paying attention to what's been going on at the university knows, that's a huge issue. I mean, you had, I believe it was 128 doctors and healthcare professionals sign a letter slamming the governance of the healthcare system at the university. So they've got their hands full. I mean, the Board of Visitors. But what they've done now is basically say anything really major at the university, they need to be consulted, and they will be the ones to make the final decision. The buck is going to, I mean, basically they're saying the buck is going to stop at the Board of Visitor level, not on the president's desk.
This is huge news, and I think very important and a good sign at the University of Virginia that the board is finally assuming its rightful role after having abdicated for decades. Joel Gardner, we had talked about a couple of these upcoming events, and we have about a minute left to tell people once again what they are and where they can get more information. So go right ahead.
Yeah, they can certainly get more information at the Jefferson Council website, which is jeffersoncouncil.org.
Okay.
Jefferson Council being one word. And, the events that we have is having the speech by Ye Only Park in March, and then our annual dinner in April, which is going to be April 8th, and we would hope anybody interested in hearing from not just alumni, but very much from faculty and students as well. And our guest speaker is going to be, keynote speaker is going to be the Attorney General, Jason Miyares. But we are granularly on what is going on at UVA on a daily basis. I mean, one of the real issues as people who love and care for this university is that most alumni, most parents, even most students, even most faculty really are not aware of what goes on grounds on a daily basis. But there has been, and it's something I've written about, which I think is key, the last decade or so has been the politicization of the grounds. And officially taking political and social issue positions and pushing an agenda rather than pushing education. And that's what we're about. We want an open and level playing field for the free and courteous exchange of ideas. And that really has not existed at the university for more than a decade.
Well, it's high time, and I'm so glad that you're doing what you're doing. Joel Gardner and the rest of the folks at the Jefferson Council are doing terrific work. And Joel, we thank you for joining us today on the Schilling Show.
Thanks again, Rob. It's always a pleasure to be speaking with you.
Indeed. And that's going to wrap up today's edition of the Schilling Show. Back here tomorrow to do it all over again. And on tomorrow's edition of the Schilling Show, we'll be speaking with Wilson Faber, who is under persecution by the National Association of Realtors for his religious position, biblical religious position. Also, our friend Neil Williamson of the Free Enterprise Forum. Lots coming up on tomorrow's Schilling Show. Send me an email. It's robs@cvilleRightNow.com. Visit us online at schillingshow.com, and we'll see you soon on the Schilling Show.